ready for the interview. In a few, get a cue live on the laptop. Watch what I'm gonna do. Welcome to the show. Let them know we got a point of view. Hey, yo, let's have a combo. Say what you feel, be real. That's the motto. Real talk pronto. Dr. D, PhD, hit an intro. Hold up, wait. Gotta be social. Network logo, a home for the locals. Gotta be social. Network logo, a home for the locals.
All right, Sophie, it looks so nice where you're at. Where are you right now?
I'm in Costa Rica right now.
Okay, Costa Rica. And you live actually kind of close to me when you're not there, it sounds like from our chat.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Because you're in Boulder. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Windsor, so we're like 45 minutes away from each other.
Okay,
Actually there.
that's pretty close. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So Costa Rica looks beautiful, looks sunny, probably nice and warm.
You know what? It's actually raining here, which is very strange for this time of the year. So it still looks pretty bright behind me.
It looks nice.
It's coming back.
Yeah, for sure. So I wanted to talk about your journey. I mean, it's very fascinating. It seems like that. I think you started, you have a master's in psychology. Is that, you have that?
Yeah.
But then you kind of took a turn after. Let's talk about this turn you've taken.
Uh-huh. You know, many people, they called me crazy back then. I loved psychology. It was so interesting, but it was very mental. It was very heady. I did a lot of research. You know, it's the topic is interesting, but in reality, I think it's quite limited. So once I got my degree and I finished, I did not really feel that inspired to be a psychologist, talking to people, or to do a bunch of research. So I'm like, now what? And I was already very deeply into yoga and meditation, and Tantra is actually not that far away from that. And then I did my very first Tantra workshop, and I realized, oh, wow, this is so complementary to everything that I've been studying in psychology. And I did a full-on, in a way, just big shift where I decided to go live in the jungle of Asia for a few years to deeply study Tantra. And that I'm so happy I did. But again, many people back then, they thought I was crazy because they didn't really understand.
Yeah. I mean, it's often what happens when people don't understand something. You get some pushback. So I think it's good. This is a good point for maybe the audience to get an idea of what is Tantra. So because I think we're saying it, but people might be like, well, I have an idea, but maybe don't know completely. So a definition or explanation, I think, is at hand here.
Yeah. So most people, when they hear the word Tantra, they think, oh, wait, this has something to do with sexuality. And yes, that's an element of Tantra. That's mostly, let's say, in the Western world, what Tantra is known for. Ultimately, the word Tantra, it actually means weaving, which can sound a little bit vague. Weaving, what does that really mean? The way that I see it is including all of life. So in a lot of, let's say, more spiritual paths, this whole idea of sexuality is not part of it. We don't talk about it. It's bad. It's wrong. It's just a lot of judgments. And in Tantra, we include everything. Like, we are here in this human body, in this physical material world. So let's not make it wrong or bad. Let's include it as a way to become more, you know, back in the day, it was about become enlightened and awake. And nowadays, you know, let's become more fulfilled, happier. And through that, like, become a better person. Might as well become enlightened along the way, if that you know, if that's part of our path. But it's a little bit, you know, vague or far away for most people. So how I would answer what is Tantra, it's a way to, if we focus a little bit more on this theme of sexuality, to include working with sexual energy and the body as a way to become better people, to become happier, more fulfilled, more connected, more spiritually connected. So it's always a little bit of a hard question to answer, but that's the essence of it, I find.
Where is, I know you talked about kind of more the Western idea about Tantra, but where is the sexual aspect of it? Why is that such a, I think on a large pop culture, when people hear that, they go, oh, sex. where does that come from, you think? Why is it so popularized?
You know, part of what Tantra is known for is the sexuality because it was so new. Most, like I said, like traditions or practices or religions, they judge sexuality.
Right.
So it was quite radical, especially in the beginning, to say, wait, working with our sexual energy can be part of that process of being spiritual. So that for a lot of people can be very, very triggering. And I think that's because it's so polarizing. That's what Tantra became very known for.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how the most polarizing thing seems to always rise to the
Yeah, that's
top,
true.
right? Instead of the other elements that are very important, but it's just maybe they're not as glamorous to other people. Yeah.
It's what happens. I see that in many examples.
So tell me about kind of your time in studying this and immersing yourself in it. How has it kind of transformed you or altered your point of view on these things?
Well, I was quite a different person, first of all, when I started my journey. I actually was very disconnected from my body, quite disconnected from others in a way, which maybe wasn't as noticeable, but when it came to intimacy and true, deep, authentic connection, it was very, very scary for me. And even, let's say, my ability to feel pleasure, it was like, it's like, sex is nice, but
Yeah.
about it. I had no idea about really what's possible on this topic. So in this journey, when I first did that Tantra workshop that I described, my first reaction was, oh, wow, there's probably going to be a lot of weird people there. I'm not so sure. Turns out everyone was actually quite normal, actually really great. Mix of different people. And yeah, it's felt very comfortable, very, let's say, normal. And I also realized that, wow, there's so much more for me to explore. And I think, wow, it's probably been about, 13, 14 years since I did that first workshop. And realizing how much disconnect there actually was and how much not knowing created this whole journey for me to ultimately come back to myself. Like, so many people, they assume when they think like, oh, wow, you spent all this time in Asia studying Tantra, that probably means that you're having sex with everyone and this is a wild, crazy time. But really, the essence of what I recommend for people to start when learning about Tantra is actually create this really deep connection with yourself and get to know your body really well. It's almost like it's a different kind of meditation, which can sound a little boring for some people, but it's not that at all. But yeah, it's like coming home to ourselves in that way. And then from there, we can start to connect with others in new ways that actually feel there's more openness, there's more aliveness in ourselves. So yeah, that's a little peek in my journey.
A little peek there. You said so getting to know your body more. So what are some steps you were taking beyond meditation to get to know your body better?
Well, first, we're actually realizing how much we live constantly from the head up. We're always in the mind, analyzing, planning, thinking, which, of course, that's how we function in the world for a big part. And I find that by learning how to, first of all, just be more actually in my body and be more aware of what's happening, there's such a different level of awareness of just moving around in the world, waking up in the morning, doing anything. And also working more specifically with sexual energy as a way to awaken the body. Because, sexual energy is so powerful. And most people, when it comes to connection to self, we think, oh, masturbation / self-pleasuring. I like the word self-pleasuring much, much more.
Yeah.
It's much more, first of all, there's a lot of shame, judgment about it. But also it's much more kind of like a going for the goal, then there's the release / the orgasm, and then it's done. It's more automatic, more habitual. And when we make it more of a practice, learning how to use breath, move that energy through the whole body using, I mean, different ways to open the body in new ways. It can be, first of all, very, I would say healing, because we have so much things that get in the way of us really being alive and being open and being connected to life and to ourselves. We all have trauma, whether trauma can be a big word, but there's so many things that get in the way of us being alive, being open,
Most
feeling.
definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Describe the term. Again, I'm big into like definitions or explaining, because I always think like when I listen to stuff, people say things and then like the host, whatever, is never comes back like, well, what does that actually mean? Type of thing. And I always think like I like people to be educated. Like, describe the term sexual energy. I hear that a lot. What does that mean?
That is such a good question. Yes. So, because I know it can sound a little bit vague, and sexual energy, it can have different flavors. I mean, first of all, simply said, it can literally just be a feeling of pleasure, a feeling of sexual aliveness that can feel like turn on, but it can also feel like more like a comfortable feeling or like a warm feeling. And that being said, it's literally anything that arises when we start to, let's say, stimulate the body. Because sexual energy, it's viewed through the lens of, oh, it needs to look like turn on and pleasure. It's like these kinds of sensations in the body. But any kind of aliveness that we notice, we can name or label as sexual energy.
Interesting. Aliveness. I like that. I think when people struggle sometimes with this type of information, it feels very ethereal, feels out there.
Yeah.
And how to make it feel relatable to people, I think is sometimes a challenge with this type of information.
Very true. Yeah. And again, because again, I love that you asked that question of sexual energy. What is that really? How would you describe it? Because even we can talk about the sensations that we feel in the body when we feel turned on. And yet there's also a little bit more of a harder to grasp or esoteric part of, oh, there is an energetic thing too, an energetic sensation. And that is, it's much more subtle.
Yeah.
It's like when imagine, let's say that you feel a little scared or nervous about something, you notice contraction in the body, you might not be breathing very well. It's like almost like something is a little like, ah. And then when you feel very happy and confident and open, like, oh, there's more space. And again, it's hard to really name or describe, but it's a different quality it's everywhere. It's not just one sensation, one thing. So that's a way how I can describe the more subtle pieces there. But again, it's good to put these things a bit more into practicality and make it more technical. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're turning the corner on this. I think more people are more open-minded to exploring sexual energy, certainly connecting with themselves, because we're certainly in a society kind of globally where there's more connection than ever to other people around the world, but there's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of disconnection with technology and those things. But you talked about your life before and then after. What was your compass for sexual energy or connection to your disconnection to your body before you started this? Where did you not learn? Or how were your parents influenced you for this, all this stuff? Where did this come from?
It's interesting because it's not like I was raised in a very suppressed, judgmental environment. It was actually quite open and sex positive. It's not like we talked about it a lot, but it was also not shamed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of shame and contraction and disconnects. And I also didn't really think I had any major trauma that happened to me. And it makes me feel a lot of compassion for people who have, because most people they have.
Yes.
But then to also learn that, wow, even if there's nothing directly like, oh, this thing happens and that thing happened, just growing up in a world that's very distorted around this topic, or
Yeah.
even, let's say, things that happen that we think are normal, and then realizing, oh, wait, actually that was not okay, or wait, this could have been a lot better.
Yeah.
It has a big impact on us.
Yeah, it does. I mean, even if you haven't experienced what may be considered major trauma, it's kind of the trauma of wakefulness, of being alive. It's just
Yeah.
being alive. There's trauma because you're always facing all these different forces on a regular basis that are coming towards you. And in general, people create drama with other people. You know, if you contact with people, you're going to have some version of that at some point in your life
Yeah.
for that, you know?
Yep. Yeah. It's a crazy world we live in. And
Yeah.
like after we get born, there's so many things that happen to us that make us disconnect from, have these protection mechanisms or contractions, or we shut down. It's we can't avoid it.
That's true. So knowing what you know now, the experiences that you have, that you'll continue to have, how do you approach relationships with people, any kind of relationship with people with this knowledge?
Mhm. Well, first of all, I find that having less fear and less blocks in my own experience helps me to connect more deeply and authentically with people. And I find that also there's a certain almost permission or trust when that's also how it went in my own journey, when I met people who they have integrated something in their experience, in their body. It almost made me remember of, oh, okay, maybe this is okay. Maybe this is allowed, or even having that as a possibility. So, I mean, even just generally speaking, now my friendships with people, they're so much more deep and meaningful. Like both people are able to open up much more, where before, there's always a certain like, oh, is this okay or not?
Yeah.
When it's like, oh, well, what if everything's welcome? It's not. Like part of this whole journey of Tantra is also about putting our expression, let's say sexually speaking, outside this box of performance, what it's supposed to look like. And like, there's so many pieces there. And when we really learn how to listen to what's actually there and let that move through,
Yeah.
there's so much freedom that opens up. And that translates also just in life, just interacting and being with people.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I've interviewed a ton of people and had a lot of connection with people who in this space and other spaces, kind of similar, kind of adjacent spaces. And you start talking and it just feels like a very normal, quote unquote, normal conversation. You can talk about sexual things and it doesn't feel like, are we really talking about this? It's like, because then when you're growing up, you've learned to put sexuality in a box. And in that box, you don't discuss things that are in that box. And if somebody mentions that, oh no, that's private. We can't discuss that. So then all of a sudden you start developing a disconnect because you've been socialized into disconnecting this part of your life with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially the parts that's might feel a bit more vulnerable
Yeah.
or insecurities, and then nobody talks about it. And then it's like, oh, we're in our own little worlds thinking something's wrong with us, and then it gets worse. It's so interesting how that is true for almost everyone.
Literally. I mean, it's when you're born and then you're basically you're downloaded all this information as you're growing up. And hey, these are the things you need to live in the world. And these things we just don't talk about. It's weird, like what we do to each other. And then you have to reprogram yourself over time to like, wait a minute, was that right? Was that not? It's strange. It's actually a strange existence. Really think about it.
I know it's so true. And what comes to mind as you're sharing that is that one of the first, I mean, actually babies, they actually self-pleasure already when they're in the womb. But what I thought of is that, let's say, as like when we're younger and we learn how to self-pleasure, how to have an orgasm, it's done in secret.
Right.
Nobody's gonna find out because that'd be really embarrassing. And that's
Yeah.
one of our first more direct experiences of sexuality. So that's the first imprint. And it's like, oh, well, there's something not okay about this.
Yeah.
And that's a big one.
It is a big one. And what's interesting, I find, especially in Western culture, is this weird relationship that parents will not want outside systems or institutions to teach their children about sex and sexuality, but then the parents don't want to do it either. Like they don't want, there are no skills to be equipped with it. So it's like, oh, you're just out there, just figure it out. It's actually really weird to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty much not talked about. And maybe there's some sort of fear-inducing thing of don't get pregnant.
Yeah.
And then there's porn that most people they learn from nowadays, which is another story. So it's really strange actually that this is just so not talked about.
Well, that's I actually had a really great conversation with a professor at a university in California, and this is her whole research is in basically Gen Z millennial sexual behavior, and that a lot of the behavior is based off of porn, and that's the learning tool. But also arousal now is very much based off of having porn. So we have lots of young people who cannot get stimulated without pornography for that. So it's just kind of a strange life, that some people are moving into.
Right. It's very disconnected from the body and the actual experience. And again, it's so incredibly common. And there's a lot of disconnects there.
So how do you approach romantic relationship? I don't know your status, whatever, but just in general, how do you approach romantic relationships with the knowledge that you have?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I find that there's so much more, I'd say, attunement there. And what I mean by that is I feel like when we start to explore this topic of Tantra, I mean, it's different for everyone and there's different stages. But I find most people, they start to develop such a strong connection to their bodies. What is actually a yes? What is a no? That where, let's say for most people, it's like, oh, well, that person is attractive. Oh, that's interesting. Let's explore. And I think it's gotten so much more nuanced over the years of, oh, okay, there might be, let's say, a person who might be, let's say, back in the day, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's exactly my type. But when this body wisdom is not connecting, this is, of course, it's also sexual, but it's also just this knowing in the body when it feels good, when there's an opening.
Yeah.
That has really become the main piece of trusting that wisdom. And it's actually quite, I was just talking actually about this with someone a few days ago, where sometimes it's actually surprising, let's say people that I'm attracted and drawn to, that maybe from the more mental part of myself, I wouldn't necessarily think so. But then trusting the body's wisdom, I find there's always the most wisdom there. So I think that's the biggest change after really exploring this topic.
Can you explain that a little bit further? Like the attraction part, like how it's different from maybe the past to present for you? Just, I mean, I'm tracking, but I feel like there's more there. More there.
So really being able to listen to the body, because something, let's say it's the ideal picture of, oh, meeting this person, going on a date, everything goes well. But still in the body, there's something that's just not quite, the best words I can describe it is opening. So, I mean, this is also very much from a woman's perspective, because let's say in attraction and sexuality, the female body, let's say, there's got to be an opening to really receive and actually to feel pleasure, even to feel turn on and to feel desire. And that is another topic, because that's also quite misunderstood. But to really listen to, okay, is this actually I'm glad you asked this question because it's actually not so easy to explain.
Exactly.
Uh-huh. The best way I can describe it is, let's say everything's going great, but then for some reason the body is just not quite a yes. And I can, let's say if the body can just really relax, if there's something in the way that feels a little anxious or a little closed off, even if it's very subtle, there's so much wisdom in that.
Yeah.
And so I can meet one person and the body is like, oh yeah, no, actually not, even though everything seems
On the surface, it seems right there, like it makes sense, right?
yes. But then I meet, let's say, another person, and for some reason that feels like on a body level, it's like, oh, okay, the body, there's a level of like deep presence there. And it also really depends, let's say, on this other person's level of presence and attunements, because that also becomes so much awakened. So again, it's basically going beyond what we think in our mind is what we want or should or supposed to, and really listen to the body level.
I mean, I know what you're talking about. I totally, it's just kind of this song and dance, like, and I feel like when you're more in tune to your body and your feelings and just who you are, you see attraction differently. Like desire builds in a different way than just purely a physical attraction desire for that. Like when I was in my 20s, honestly, that was kind of just mainly it. I was like, wow, this is pretty hot. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a thing. And you get older, I don't know. And if you really like start working on yourself, and that's why I think it's important, like working on yourself, your mind, your body, being open to different ideas, you start seeing attraction differently. And so all of a sudden that stereotypically attraction, you think, oh, there should be attraction here. May not feel that. You may look past and go, there's not a lot there on underneath the surface. And the desire is not there because of that. That's kind of what it sounds like, a little bit more.
Right. It's this constant listening of, okay, is this actually feel like a full yes? Because people, they don't really know what's like a full yes feels like.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's strange, right? It's like, I don't know. I feel like we're saying this like we get it here, just like, but I think like I have people I know, I think they don't understand this concept. It's purely physical, but then like they don't understand why then there's not a deeper connection beyond that. Like you're like in the half level on this, you know.
It's almost, and everyone, it's a certain phase where it's like, all right, patient, and then I find sometimes over time, sometimes it shows up as not feeling as fulfilled or wanting more. And then that goes in this journey of, okay, let's become more connected to myself, listening more, or even with others, like, oh, wait, what else is there?
Yeah.
And then they're discovering, oh, okay, so this actually is what it could be like.
Yeah.
Or also learning like what is actually our no. And this is, I mean, for men and women, it's a little bit stronger for women.
Yeah.
To really learn like what is the no, which sometimes can be subtle. Maybe it's a maybe. And then from that maybe or a little bit of a yes, how can someone get to a full yes? And that takes again, attunement and practice and exploration. It's really fun, actually.
Yeah. So I think this is interesting then. So like when you are, maybe approaching someone or your date or whatever, can you sense that pretty quickly in someone if the attunement's there or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's pretty instant. I feel like
right.
Once we develop it and aware of it in ourselves, it's really, again, it's again one of these things that can be a little bit hard to grasp or explain. But again, it's not from the mind. It's a deeper inner knowing or almost recognition or body wisdom we just sense. And again, it's a natural byproduct of working with the body, of waking up the because the body is so incredibly wise.
Yes. Yeah. It makes, it's so, I think it's just a deeper level of knowing yourself. And when you have a deeper level of knowing yourself, you see that or you don't see that in other people when it comes to attraction. You're like, oh, we're not there. There's no wavelength here. Not because of the physical aspect, but there's just nothing deeper there between us. And I think if you're not working on yourself, you don't understand when someone doesn't feel that way about you. You're like, why not? Look at me. I have this, I have that, I have this going on. It's like, yeah, but that's not really the end product I'm looking for.
Right. I know what you mean. And even this topic of like, so often, let's say people come to me and they're like, oh, I want to feel more confident, I want to feel more attractive. And it's really not about, I mean, the things are more on the surface level that we think are important. Not to say
Yeah,
they're not important,
sure.
but the actual like deeper power lies into to cultivating that it's almost like a magnetism
Yes.
where it is attunement, which is very magnetic is the best way I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
call it.
yeah.
And also, wherever we are on our journey there, it's easy to be like, oh, it's better to be more attuned and more aware. But again, it's a journey. So
Yeah.
wherever we're at, that's great. Just know that there's so much more that we can explore within ourselves that is only
Yeah.
going to make it better. And there's no upper limit. So it's a really fun journey to be on.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, I'd love to hear like where you see yourself moving towards in this journey. You've had a lot of experience. Where are you taking that from here on out?
So lately I've been doing many different things in my work, in person, one-on-one groups. And lately what I've been really feeling into is bringing back more that in-person elements combined with a longer virtual journey.
Mm,
Because I honestly would never think I would do the main part of my work virtually, which has
right.
been great. And it works great. And there's so much magic there. And to have that combination of, okay, let's explore, especially that topic of intimacy and things that get in the way. Because when we're with someone in person, that's especially when these deeper parts come up. And also at the same time, being online with in a container or a journey can create a certain safety of, oh, okay, I can I have permission in the space to talk about these things and to do these different practices. So yeah, the combination of in-person and virtual is something that I'm creating some new offerings around that I'm really excited for.
That's awesome. Well, please tell everyone how they could connect with you, Sophie, to get more of that information and be a part of those offerings.
Awesome. So probably best is my website. It's sophielua.com. That's Sophie with PH and then LUA. And then I'm not so active anymore on social media. If you want, you can find me on Instagram. I'm slowly feeling the inspiration to come back there. It's by.sophielua. But probably my website is the best way to send me a message there.
Awesome. This was as good as I thought it was going to be, and even better. I mean, really, really beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Sophie.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for your time as well. And yeah, for the invitation.
You got it. Thanks. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.